Welcome to another episode of B-Movie Enema, the series, my Animaniacs. My name is Jeff Arbuckle, and with me as always is Nurse Disembody. Nurse, how's it going?
It's a dog-eat-dog world out there, Jeffrey, and I'm wearing Milk-Bone underwear.
Well, that just sounds great. Anyway, also with us is the great B-Movie Poop Shoot. How's it hanging, PC? Well, ain't that the truth? I mean, I see that you already have this week's movie, so let's take a look and see what we have for this week. Alright, well, Nurse, what do you say to watching something from the swingin' 60s?
Ooh, that sounds fun to me.
And what do you think about a movie made in England?
Sounds classy.
How do you feel about ventriloquist dummies?
They can be appropriately spooky.
Then I think I got just the movie for you. This week we're going to be watching 1964's Devil Doll.
A black and white movie from the 60s, made in England, about a ventriloquist dummy that may just be a doll and definitely devilish in some way? I'm in.
Oh, you bet your bippy, Nurse. Devil Doll comes to us from Lindsay Shonteff. Now, Shonteff was not a British director. He was actually from Canada. It's not too uncommon for Canadian filmmakers to get opportunities abroad like that back then, especially when it came to the UK. Alvin Rakoff is another great example of a filmmaker born in Canada who would get a lot of work in the UK. Particularly on television. Now, Rakoff made Death Ship, which was a Canadian-British co-production with stars from England, Canada, and the United States. But my point is that Canadian filmmakers were exported to other countries like the UK and the US to make their movies. Now, Poop Shoot put a bug in my ear. Either that or a little poop in my ear. Nurse, I think I might need you to check to see if it's a bug or if it's a poop.
Nah, I don't think I will.
Anyway, Poop Shoot has given me a little bit of a preview of what movies he plans to put into rotation later this season.
Oh yeah?
Yep, and he told me that we don't just have another Lindsay Shonteff movie coming to us soon, but we have 2 more Shonteff joints in the pipeline. Or the poop line, I suppose.
Do they have dolls and devils?
Hey, possibly.
Neato.
Now, Shonteff made a lot of different types of movies. He got his start with a Western called The Hired Gun, which was shot in 1959, but didn't see release until 1961. Devil Doll was the follow-up made in 1964. So, right away, he made a Western and then a horror film. Devil Doll turned out to be a relatively appreciated for what Shonteff could do from a technical and plot perspective. So, in 1965, he made another horror film with a dash of adventure and what I'm sure is a whole lot of fairly stereotypical depictions of Africans called Curse of Simba.
Yeah, that 60s live-action version of Lion King sure is a weird one.
His very next film was a James Bond-style film that I also want you to put a bookmark on because we'll be coming back around to that in a few weeks. But once his career shifted into the 70s, he made a sex drama along with a crime film and another thriller that kind of borders on the new giallo style of thriller. Keep that last one in mind too, because we'll be circling back around to that later this year as well. He made a few exploitation films too. Perhaps his biggest cult classic film was 1970's Permissive, which followed a young groupie as she was trying to find her place in that subculture within the rock and roll world. But one thing that Wikipedia would mention more than once when it came to Shonteff's films in the 70s is that he had a lot of rarely seen films on his resume. Clegg, The Fast Kill, and his films into the 80s made Shonteff a more obscure figure in film. However, a theme that would also keep coming back up in Shonteff's filmography is that he made a lot of imitation James Bond films. He made something like 4 knockoffs of Bond, including one that used the working title of 008 of the Secret Service. Now, that movie was made in 1977 and was basically a product of an ongoing duel between the Bond producers at Eon Productions and a rival, Kevin McClory, who had this long battle that would continue to rear its ugly head throughout the 60s, 70s, and early 80s. In this case, it caused a delay in getting the next Bond film, The Spy Who Loved Me, into production and released. Now, seizing on this, Shantef directed that movie that had that 008 working title, but ultimately called it Number One of the Secret Service. Lindsay Shantef worked until the day he died, literally, just like all of us will. We're going to work ourselves to death, my friends. It's the way of the world. It's how we chose to build our society. I will be staring death in his black, bottomless voids of eternity while I write an email to a customer asking me to cancel a contract. Then I will embrace the forever sleep of death.
Jeff!
God, sorry there, folks. I just had a moment of existential crisis, but I'm back. We're all good here. Anyway, yes, Lindsay Shantef literally worked right up to his death. His final film, 2009's Angels, Devils, and Men, was in production, and on the final day of production, March 11th, 2006, that was the day that Shantef died from an undisclosed cause.
That's kind of sad. He didn't even get a chance to enjoy the end of his life in retirement.
Yep, just like the rest of us won't.
That doesn't make me feel any better.
Nope, but maybe this movie will make you feel better. So let's get started on Devil Doll, and we'll be back here after the first segment of the movie.
You know why I never volunteer for a stage hypnotist?
Because they're evil?
Because they're evil.
But hey, he's both a stage hypnotist and a ventriloquist. That's two kinds of creep for the price of one.
Yeah, I'm sure he never creeped anyone out ever. Say, do you think people watched this movie and got inspired to become a hypnotist so they could score with lots of chicks?
Oh yeah, between 1964 and 1967, there was a rash of young, creepy dudes who learned how to hypnotize women all across the United Kingdom. It was an epidemic of pretty women being suddenly compelled to dance the twist like they were professional dancers.
Gosh, I bet they were a bunch of weirdos.
Totally. Now that stage performer, the Great Varelli?
Yeah?
Would you believe it if I told you that he was actually, and indirectly, an exceptionally important figure in film preservation and home video?
Not likely, but I'm guessing you're about to explain how that guy was an exceptionally, yet indirectly important figure in film preservation and home video.
The Great Varelli is played by Bryant Halliday. Now, Halliday was born in Albany, New York in 1928. In the 40s, he intended to study law at Harvard, but he was also an actor and helped form the Brattle Theater Company in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The BTC, as it's known, performed at the Brattle Theater, which itself was an American version of England's The Old Vic. And in the late 40s, Halliday, who probably grew up with some money, bought the Brattle Theater, but BTC dissolved only a few years later. However, in the mid-50s, he went into business with his friend Cyrus Harvey Jr., and the pair had already had some business dealings, but in 1956, they formed Janus Films. As a quick side note, Janus Films is named for the two-faced Roman god of beginnings and endings. January is named for Janus. But before forming Janus Films, Halliday and Harvey would screen films from both America and elsewhere at the Brattle Theater. Later, the partners moved to New York City to the 55th Street Playhouse and continued to screen these specialty films. In March of 1956, Janus Films was founded. In 1965, after 9 years of collecting films and showing these art films from the US and overseas, they sold Janus Films. And later, in 1977, Kino Lorber, an American company that also distributed films, bought the entire catalog of films that Janus owned. But the most famous arm of Janus Films today is, without a doubt, the Criterion Collection. Criterion was founded 40 years ago in 1984. Today, Criterion is a leader in film preservation and home video distribution. There are two major things that Criterion brought to cinephiles in the 80s. The first is letterboxing, and that is the whole thing with displaying a film with the black bars on top and bottom of the screen to preserve the original format of the film's presentation. The first film to be released on home video with letterboxing was the 8th film that Criterion released on Laserdisc, which was 1956's Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It was the first time a film was released that way, and no film shot in either scope or flat formats would ever be released again by the Criterion Collection in standard full-screen format, which was the home video standard of the time. They also introduced the concept of commentary soundtracks on films with their second ever Laserdisc release, King Kong. Criterion was the creator of other concepts too, like special editions that would feature a lot of behind-the-scenes features, original trailers, specialty made documentary features, and more. Being a big part of the digital formats of the 80s and 90s, they were instrumental in bringing older films to new audiences in restored versions. The big thing for Criterion is film preservation and restoration. They can make movies look really good, and they can make sure original film versions are forever preserved and kept available when possible.
And it all started with one half of the Janus guys who would later play a creepy stage hypnotist.
Yep, just another reminder to always dream big.
Yeah, sure. Anyway, who else is in this movie?
Yeah, let's start with the lovely Marianne Horn, played by Yvonne Romain. Now, Romain was from London and had already been a veteran of several movies dating back to the mid-50s. She was often in horror films, which included movies like Corridors of Blood, and then The Curse of the Werewolf, where she played the mother of the character eventually played by the fresh-faced newcomer Oliver Reed. She would be done with film after the 1973 mystery The Last of Sheila, but it's not like she really needed acting that much. Her husband was songwriter Leslie Breckus. Now, Breckus wrote music for films like Dr. Dolittle, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and the James Bond themes for Goldfinger and You Only Live Twice. She did get an opportunity to sign a contract with Federico Fellini, but she didn't want to be pulled away from Hollywood for 7 years where her husband and son lived. And speaking of You Only Live Twice, the third member of this three-person triangle of stars is William Sylvester playing Mark English.
Mark English? That would be like you being cast to play a guy named Jeff American.
No doubt. William Sylvester was mostly a bit player, but he does have a few significant films on his resume. He was in 1961's Gorgo. He then had an uncredited role in You Only Live Twice. However, his most famous movie by far is 2001: A Space Odyssey, and in that he played Dr. Haywood Floyd. Floyd was the head of the U.S. National Council of Astronautics, and he goes to the moon to investigate a recently discovered monolith that was buried under the moon's surface for millions of years. And in the sequel, 2010, The Year We Make Contact, Floyd was given a lead role and then played by Roy Scheider. Okay. So, now that we've caught up with the major players of Devil Doll, let's get back to the movie. What do you think, Nurse?
I agree. I think we should.
Alright, so let's get back to Devil Doll, and when we come back...
Oh no, I command you to not return to the movie. You are to stay and feel my power.
No, you know what? We're going back to the movie. Let's watch the next part of the movie, and we'll come back and figure out whatever this is.
No. You are to stay here. I command you to speak to me. Don't watch the movie. Talk to me.
I never knew there were naked breasts in this movie.
That's because I commanded there to be titties in the movie. In fact, Nurse Disembody, I command you to striptease.
Nah, I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah. Just as I commanded, you will remain clothed.
Anyway, as I was saying.
Yes, you're going to talk about the naked breast. I command you to talk about the breast.
I was going to... Anyway, I only ever knew of this movie through the 1997 Mystery Science Theater 3000 episode. I know the show would, of course, trim out language and nudity from any movie they showed. However, it goes a little bit beyond that in this movie. This is a black and white 1964 British movie. None of those things would indicate to me that I should expect to see boobies.
Boobies are always a nice surprise, but I have some beef with this movie when it comes to that first scene with the boobs.
Oh, do tell.
Yes, I command you to talk about the boobs.
You be quiet.
Okay, I'll be quiet.
As I was saying, they go to all that work to get the stuffy broad who plays cello and wearing all the clothes to go up on stage and get hypnotized to become a stripper. And what do? They cut away to a boring old office scene. Missed opportunity, movie. Missed opportunity. At least with the second set of boobs, there's a good reason to cut away to Mark with the phone call going on and everything.
So there are a couple of things about the fact that this generally very British movie has two scenes of nudity so close to each other in terms of time within this movie. Between 1934 and 1968, it was more or less impossible for mainstream American movies to show nudity. And that was due to the very strict Hays Code that kind of neutered movies for decades. Sure, there were the nudie cuties and such, but those weren't mainstream films. Those and other stag films would have separate distribution to specific theaters. There were nude scenes filmed for some movies, two of which were with Marilyn Monroe at the very end of her career, but neither scene ever made it to the final cuts of the movie that played in theaters at the time. However, for this movie, the British Ratings Board nearly gave the movie an X rating. It had nothing to do with the sexual content of the movie. Naked girlfriend of a sort of slimy reporter, that's not all that explicit. The stripper on stage, that's more explicit, as it most definitely played as a girl being kind of turned on by the music. And that's what gives Varelli the idea to make her strip. I mean, the whole concept of Varelli having this typical assistant and hypnotizing the heiress are both kind of unspoken sexual objects for the bad guy. But anyway, even the new girl is kind of a sex pot too, and that's more undertone. But those aren't the reason for the threatened X rating. There is more to the backstory we will see in the upcoming segment about Hugo that was a little too much for the British censors, so that had to be cut to avoid the X rating. At least in England, but I digress. So, what's your story?
I am the great Devilini.
But what's your shtick?
I am a great hypnotist and magician.
Got it. So, I don't know, do a trick or something.
Nurse Disembody, dance the twist.
No.
Do the monkey?
Pass.
The pony?
Nah.
I command you to do the mashed potato.
I'm kind of feeling it.
Yes. Wait, really?
No, I'm just messing with you.
Damn.
Okay. Try something else.
Okay. Pull a card. I will guess it by reading your mind.
Alright. Do your worst.
Dr. Jeff, your card is the 7 of clubs.
No.
It isn't?
No, it's the King of Hearts. It's also my nickname.
Okay, do me.
Do you?
You know what I mean. Guess the card.
I am reading your mind. I am controlling your mind. I am reading your mind. I am controlling your mind. Your card is coming to me. Your card is the Ace of Spades.
No, it's the 3 of diamonds. That's like the opposite of the Ace of Spades.
Give me another shot.
Alright, fine.
Nurse Disembody, I'm reading your mind. Your mind is under my power. I'm reading your mind. Your card is the Jack of Clubs.
Not even close. I have the 5 of hearts.
Okay. Only because I told you to pick the 5 of hearts. Dr. Jeff, I am reading your mind. I'm inside your mind. Your card is the 9 of hearts.
No, I have the card that teaches you how to play poker. You suck, my dude.
It's an off night for me.
Clearly. Alright. So, we're going to get back to the movie for the thrilling and shocking conclusion to Devil Doll, and we'll be back after the end of the movie.
When I have total control over Jeff and Nurse Disembody. Do you feel anything yet?
I don't know. Maybe a little bit?
So, you want to eat a banana?
Well, yeah. I always want to eat a banana. It's a good source of potassium.
But will you eat it slowly and sensually and seductively?
I mean, is there any other way to eat a banana?
And so Varelli is trapped inside a dummy, and Hugo is finally free of Varelli's cruel control. Yeah, I guess it is in that last segment that the cuts had to be made to prevent this getting an X rating. That whole backstory about Hugo and Mercedes and their dealings early on with Varelli is kind of weird and disturbing. It also seems as though that maybe Hugo was seduced by Varelli in the kind of cult of personality in one way, with the whole occult power in another way, and maybe even in a sort of homosexual sort of way too. It could definitely have some read that way. I think The Devil Doll is an interesting movie and appropriately creepy. It does get a little bit of criticism for being a little too slow-paced. However, I think it actually helps this movie. It creates this atmosphere that I quite like. One more thing before I turn it over to Nurse Disembody to give her final thoughts. Originally, this film was set to be directed by Sidney J. Furie. Now, Furie was a friend of Shantev's. And the two of them were Canadian, and Shantev went to the UK in the footsteps of Furie, who went there first. Furie was offered a little bit better of a movie, which I'm assuming is the Ipcris File, which starred Michael Caine and produced by Harry Saltzman, who was half of the Eon Productions team that did all the official Bond films. But that led to Furie turning down Devil Doll. And with Furie out, he actually recommended Shantev, and that basically made Shantev's career. Furie would have some interesting and well-appreciated movies on his resume, but he is also known for directing the stinker Superman 4: The Quest for Peace in 1987. I remember seeing that movie in theaters in the summer of 1987 with a friend, and I remember getting the comic book adaptation at the newsstand, and I definitely remember it was maybe the first movie I could really kind of puzzle out and think to myself, gee, movies can be pretty bad sometimes. But before then, I always thought of movies as always being these kind of important and always magical things. So thanks, Sidney J. Furie, for making me realize that is not the case. But anyway, Nurse D, what did you think of Devil Doll?
Devil Doll has a little bit of everything. It's got that creepy doll thing, it's got the evil hypnotist, it has titties, it has occult shit. I really like the way this movie is shot with the camera angles, the close-ups, and how the black and white always added extra darkness around Varelli. The soundtrack was well done too. It just helped make this movie spooky. And I agree with you, Jeff. The slower pace was good for most of this movie. If I had to give two teeny tiny complaints about this movie, it would be that I wished the big finale was a little more drawn out and not so quick. And I would like to speak to the manager about how they cut away from the stripping girl dancing with her boobies out and flopping about. That should have been extended, but that said, I give Devil Doll 5 poops out of 5. And be sure to see the great Devilini, master hypnotist and superb magician when he comes to a town near you. All hail the great Devilini.
Finally, I have control over Nurse Disembody's mind. But now I must go to a performance. The great Devilini. Away.
Nurse, what was that at the end?
Oh, that? That was nothing. I had to throw him a bone, or that devil puppet was never going to leave us alone.
Oh, yeah, good thinking, Nurse. Alright, Animaniacs, that does it for this week's B-Movie Enema, the series. For the great B-Movie Poop Shoot and Nurse Disembody, I'm Jeff Arbuckle, and I'll see you all next week.
Must eat a banana slowly and seductively. Must go see the great Devilini's performance.